I finally have a chance to do a spoiler review, so here we go. Hi everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to Tread Talks, where I walk on this treadmill to stay in shape while making videos for you fine people. So this video is going to be a little bit more raw and less put together than my other videos, but I really wanted to get a chance to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming in a manner that wasn't constricted by the fact that I had to do a review for people who might not have seen it. But if you have seen the movie, or if you don't care about spoilers, then stick with me because I'm going to tell you everything I liked and I didn't like and some other thoughts along the way. Here we go. So the movie starts with this montage or this Instagram or Snapchat story put together by Peter Parker after he's been invited by Tony Stark to take part in that big Civil War fight. And I thought it was hilarious and a great way to start the movie and to set the tone for what was going to come. And really, this is what a 14-year-old would put together. And kudos to him for not sharing it since it's top secret information. It's kind of sad. He's putting together kind of a Snapchat story that only he would ever get to watch. And I also thought it was very cool that they showed those scenes from Captain America Civil War from Spider-Man's vantage point. Because what exactly was he doing until Iron Man said, "Underoos"? And I'm a sucker for movies that show you scenes from previous films from a different character's vantage point. It's one of the reasons I really like the final half of Back to the Future Part 2, and I thought it worked great here. But anyways, it's great because it sets the tone for the movie and it tells us that we're in for something a little bit lighter, a little bit more humorous. It gets us going on the right foot. And then we get introduced to Michael Keaton as the Vulture. I don't know what his real name was. I don't think that's ever mentioned. And his crew is basically taking care of the cleanup after the big battle in New York in the first Avengers movie. And apparently he's mortgaged his home and sold off a bunch of stuff in order to get the equipment necessary to complete the job. And then here comes the Department of Damage Control, which is a really goofy name, by the way. It's the first instance of the humor that didn't really work for me. But they come in and they take over and he punches the guy out. And I thought that was great because very quickly we understand, hey, this guy isn't like some evil villain. He's just been really wronged. And also he's pretty prone to just fly off the handle and punch a guy. So it's not surprising that he takes this big setback and turns it into an organization that sells crazy weapons in just 8 years. And then at some point along the way he decides that he's going to make himself a Vulture suit. Anyways, we've got our villain and we've got a very clear, simple motivation that's going to carry on through to the end of the film. And then we're back with Peter Parker after that Civil War fight. It's not like he's going to be an Avenger. He has to go back and do high school. And so then we get into the high school scenes, and I think those are some of the best parts of the movie. The tone is so light, the humor works most of the time, and for some reason I really get a kick out of the fact that a lot of the high school kids, the actors that they cast for those roles, actually look like they're in high school. There's especially one throwaway scene where something is happening and you're trying to, and one of the characters is trying to hide from people going through the high school. This happens a little bit later on in the film, and randomly this kid just peeks his head out and he's like, "What are you doing?" I thought it was great, and that kid looks like he's right smack dab in the middle of high school. So we get introduced to the love interest, and then we also get introduced very briefly to Zendaya's character that turns out to be MJ. I was disappointed with how they utilized this character because all she gets are these random, ambiguous scenes throughout the movie, and half the time it's like, why are you here? Half the time the characters ask her, why are you here? So probably in the sequel her character will be fleshed out more, but for the purposes of this movie, it just felt random. It felt like shoehorning something into a movie where it didn't really fit. But all throughout his day, you can tell that Peter Parker just wants to get to being Spider-Man again. And that was one of the best scenes, watching him actually put on the suit, because if you think about it, the Spider-Man suit isn't the easiest thing to get into if you think about it just as something that tightly hugs your skin. So watching the fact that it was created by Tony Stark so that he can slip it on and then it suddenly contracts, that was awesome to see, and it's somewhat plausible. At least it makes sense in terms of how he's able to get change so quickly. And then we get Spider-Man trying to be Spider-Man, and those are some of the funniest moments in the film. Like when he comes across that guy that he thinks is breaking into his car, and then he stops him right away, a split second before the guy says, "It's my car." I was thinking, it's his car! And it was, and that was great. And then you have the Stan Lee cameo, and that's thankfully short. I don't like Stan Lee cameos anymore. But it was great to see him making an effort as a superhero and having those efforts not always succeed. Even when it's a legitimate crime, like those people that are trying to steal the money from the ATM, it doesn't go according to plan. The guy from the bodega almost gets killed, as does his cat, but thankfully they both survive. So this was a refreshing departure from the conflicted superhero stories that we've been seeing recently, where you have people that have great power and they don't know if they want to bear the responsibility. This guy wants the responsibility. This guy wants more responsibility, and he's just begging Tony Stark to give him a chance. Now, of course, all those calls go unanswered, and I really felt for him because I know what it's like to try to get in contact with someone and then they're not responding and you're wondering why not. And what a great little moment later on in the film where, as part of their conversation, Tony Stark mentions something that Peter Parker had left in one of those messages. It was great that there was that moment that shows that he does care as a mentor. He's trying to do a good job raising this kid. So anyways, in a surprising failure of his Spidey sense, and I'm not sure if that's exactly how it works, but somehow he sneaks into his room and he's so focused on not getting seen by Aunt May that his friend discovers that he's Spider-Man. And I love the way that he geeks out over it. I love the fact that he's like, "Are you an Avenger?" And of course, Tom Holland says, "Yeah, basically," which is a big lie, but of course, he's been telling everyone that he's part of a Stark internship all this time. So he's not exactly wanting to discuss where he actually falls on the totem pole. Okay, so let's talk about Aunt May. I like the fact that we have a young Aunt May. I think it gives a different dynamic to it, and it makes the character into someone that can go in a little bit of a different direction. For example, she is not afraid to talk to Peter about how his changing body might be why he's nervous about going into this big party. I like those little subtle moments where you can see it's not a mom, it's an aunt who's trying to take care of their kid. I also like that they don't call her Aunt May. They make it a point to just say May, and that probably would be something that the character would tell people to do. A young aunt might say, "Don't call me Aunt May, just call me May." But I don't quite follow why every single male character has to be so smitten over her. I understand Tony Stark, I understand the guy at the bodega, but Ned is also into her, the guy at the restaurant is into her, and it felt like it was a joke that was worn a little bit too thin. But with that said, there's another funny high school moment where his friend reveals to Liz that apparently Peter Parker knows Spider-Man. That gets him invited to a big party at her house. And going into that scene, I was wondering, is he going to, show up at the party? Is that the scene that we see in the trailers where he swings through and splashes the pool? Is Peter Parker going to get some street cred? Well, none of that happens because, conveniently enough, I guess, they see one of the bad guys shooting off a purple laser. That's where we get introduced to Donald Glover for his stint in the movie. Some people are saying that Donald Glover, when he mentions his cousin, that's some sort of introduction to Miles Morales. That could be the case. Take that for what you will. It seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. And then begins an awesome chase sequence, and one of the things I loved about that sequence is that you're seeing Spider-Man swinging and navigating through an area that isn't filled with skyscrapers. In fact, one of the funniest moments of the movie is where he's actually caught in an open field and he actually has to run. And he says to himself, "This sucks!" Yes, it does, and it's hilarious, and it's surprising that it hasn't been depicted before in any of the 5 or 6 or however many previous movies came before this one. So he's chasing them and he's taking advantage of any structures he can utilize. He destroys a treehouse. He lands in front of a tent and his eyes go all buggy and he scares the bejesus out of these 2 girls. And here's yet another instance where it's important to not watch trailers if you can avoid them, because that moment was in the trailers and it would have been spoiled and it was hilarious. But anyways, it's such an awesome depiction of how Spider-Man would navigate through something other than a skyscraper-filled environment. And then at the last second, the Vulture swoops in and lifts him up into the air. And this is where I first got the sense that what they were going for with the Vulture was this very scary, very menacing, almost horror film type of approach for the character. You get these green eyes that just glow, and the music serves to amp up how scary this character is supposed to be. Especially for Spider-Man, who's seeing this guy for the first time, and he's wondering, what the hell is this? So anyways, the parachute deploys, and he gets sucked down into the water, and then you don't get to see exactly what rushes into the water, which I think was a great move, because I was thinking to myself, is the Vulture trying to grab him out of the water? But no, it's Iron Man, and he brings him over. And what I was thinking throughout that scene when he's talking to Tom Holland and all we see is the suit is like, wow, they really couldn't get Robert Downey Jr. on set for more than a couple of days, huh? Because this entire scene is with the mask on. But then right before it showed up, it clicked with me, no, this is actually one of the suits. It's not really Tony who's there. No, he's off in some other part of the country, and it just amazes me that Wi-Fi works well enough that he's able to execute this rescue. One thing that didn't quite make sense is how Spider-Man, or how the Iron Man suit was able to get Spider-Man out of the parachute, because he seemed to be really tangled up in it. But anyways, a small moment of suspending disbelief. Now, the only place the humor didn't really work for me was in the scenes with Michael Keaton and his henchmen in the lab. I don't understand why they tried to apply the same comedic tone to those scenes as they do the rest of the movie, especially when they're trying to establish that this is a menace to be afraid of, especially the Vulture, that this is someone who you should really fear. And so there's that scene where he basically disintegrates one of his henchmen who's gone rogue, and instead of playing that with the gravity that it deserves, there's this like throwaway gag line of, oh, I thought it was the gravity gun and not the death ray or whatever. It completely undercut what they were trying to do with that scene, and it took me out of it a little bit. But hey, Peter Parker's not going to let some empty shell of an Iron Man suit tell him not to go after the bad guy. He is determined, and he ends up going to the National Academic Decathlon. I'm sure that's not what it was called, but he goes there because that's going to be near where the bad guy is. And this is where they discover that Spider-Man's suit, as a amazing as it already is actually on a mode called Training Wheels mode, which I thought was hilarious and such a blow to Peter Parker when he learns that that's actually the mode that the suit's been set on. So they disable it, and suddenly he has so many options. And so then the suit becomes almost overwhelmingly amazing with hundreds and hundreds of web combinations, and that allows for some of the funnier little bits in the movie, like do you want to enable instant death mode, and the eyes shut and they become red. It was awesome. And then we get another super scary horror music filled scene with the Vulture trying to rob that semi and Spider-Man trying to stop him. And of course it doesn't go exactly as planned, and I'm not sure how Spider-Man gets a concussion when he doesn't receive any other damage from any of the other times that he's slammed against stuff. But hey, it's one of those moments that you gotta accept to get to the next scene where he's trapped inside that bunker with all of the damage control stuff. He misses the academic decathlon and all of his friends are going up the Washington Monument, and of course you have that big scene that we saw in the trailers play out, which, I thought that was very well done. I didn't quite buy the fact that he could shatter the tempered glass at the top with that extra swing around the helicopter, but it works and he saves them, and I love that moment where he's hanging upside down and the AI of the suit tells him, "Now's your chance to kiss her." And at first I was like, what the heck? And then I thought, oh, Spider-Man won. Yes, that is the moment to kiss her. But anyways, he saves them, and now I bet you he's feeling all heroic and like he can do anything. And so he ends up on that big boat. And this is one of the scenes that I thought worked pretty well as a big action set piece, and it was kind of cool to see a reprisal of Spider-Man trying to hold two things together, or trying to hold things back with all his might, kind of like what we saw in Spider-Man 2. It wasn't as visceral and as effective as that scene, but I thought it worked. And of course he fails at doing so. What I didn't like about this scene is that the cut that was made in the ship was made perfectly down the middle, and the fact that nobody died when that happened, and the fact that it gets put back together so easily by Iron Man and a lot of those flares that just suddenly magically are able to push the ship back together. The ship is still floating. He's able to seal it with this beam. It just came off too clean and too perfect. I would have enjoyed something a little bit messier, something a little bit more off-center. Maybe somebody dies. I know that they couldn't do that because they didn't want to put that burden on the character, and that's part of the tone of the film, but some sort of sense that people at least escaped near death. We don't get to see any of that. And then when Iron Man comes back to scold him and take away his suit, I thought it was great that they had that little subversion of your expectations when it's actually him inside the suit. And this was another scene that was spoiled for me in the trailers. I don't know why they include this kind of clear reference to a scene that relies on you not knowing what's going to happen in order for the scene to work. Okay, so he takes the suit back, and now we're about 2/3 into the movie, and he's getting ready for homecoming. Okay, this was a scene I have to talk about. He tells Liz that he likes her, and suddenly she likes him back and wants to go to homecoming with him? I don't understand. This is a guy who's been abandoning you at several instances throughout the movie, the most notable of which being the academic competition. He abandons the team shortly after finding out how important it is to you. And for some reason, you still like the guy? You still want to go to homecoming with him? That made no sense to me, except for the fact that they needed to get to the next scene. And oh boy, what a scene that was, because I forgave the whole Liz thing after this happened. He shows up to pick her up to homecoming, and who opens the door but the Vulture? And you're like, what? My theater, half the people literally gasped. They went, whoa! And immediately my mind is wondering, did he kill her family? This is dark. And then it turns out that it's her dad, and I thought, how brilliant, because how tension-filled is that scene in the kitchen where Michael Keaton is interrogating him and he's got a knife, and from Michael Keaton's perspective, he's just dealing with the kid that's taking her daughter out, but from Tom Holland's perspective, it's like, this is the guy. This guy is evil. I need to take him out. And they handled that brilliantly. And then that car ride over to the school. Oh, how tension-filled, and how they used the light of the stoplight to play off of Michael Keaton's face, and the change to the green when he's put together the fact that this is Spider-Man. And then that scene in the parking lot where, oh, hey, Liz, don't worry, I'm going to give him the talk. Yeah, what a talk. I will kill you. I will kill your family. I will kill everyone. Such menace in his voice. I was never more scared of that character than I was in that moment, in that simple bit of dialogue in the car. And then Peter Parker has to make a decision. Does he take the offer that the Vulture, that Michael Keaton, what's his name, that he's been given, and just forget about the Vulture and just go to the homecoming dance, or does he do what's right? And this is one thing I love about this iteration of Spider-Man. He's much less conflicted. He sees what needs to be done, and he just goes for it. And so, of course, he goes to track him down. He gets his old suit back, and then, of course, as he leaves the school, he gets punched out by Shocker, and then with a quick save by his best friend, which, well, a little bit out of the blue and coincidental and fortunate, but, that's fine. So then he catches catches up to and confronts Michael Keaton, and I love that villain monologue that he gives for a couple of reasons. One, I like that they didn't just play it straight. I like that he was using it just as a chance to, get his bird up in flight. And of course, it's also for us to give us more insight into his motivations and how he doesn't see himself as very different than Tony Stark. So he crashes the building down on Peter. That's fine. I thought it was a little bit too on the nose when he looks down into the water and sees the mask, and it's half his mask and half his face, and, who is he really? And if he's nothing but the suit, then what is he? I don't know how thinking about what Robert Downey Jr. told him, and I thought it was a little too on the nose that they brought back that line in his head for us to know what he was thinking about. I don't know how that gave him the strength to push up rocks that he couldn't push up before. And hey, then we're off to the final sequence of the movie, which I thought was thankfully lower stakes. You have the Vulture trying to get a big score from the fact that Tony Stark is moving the stuff upstate. It's nice that it fits in line with what's happening in the rest of the Avengers universe at the time. And I also like that it was kind of sprinkled throughout the rest of the movie, this big option that he didn't want to take and now he's forced to do it. And I also thought that camouflage that the plane has, the bunch of lights that light up as it flies through the sky, I thought that was great because it gave a certain sense of color to the final battle. And so it took something that would have otherwise been dark and kind of forgettable and made it into something a little bit more exciting from a visual standpoint. And I also like that at the end of the fight, Spider-Man saves the Vulture. I think it's very much in line with Peter Parker as a character, as a hero, and I'm not going to lie, it gives me hope that they're going to bring back Michael Keaton in the future. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I just want to see more of that actor in this universe. He was that good in this role. Okay, so Spider-Man is victorious, and now here's a part of the movie that I didn't quite understand, and maybe you can help me make sense of it. Tony Stark is now ready to make him an Avenger. And I don't understand why, other than the fact that this time he won and tried to contact him versus the other time where he failed and didn't try to contact him. How does this suddenly make him able to be an Avenger? What growth has he shown? And so I'm glad that in the end Peter says no to it and he thinks that it's a test, because it should have been a test, because it doesn't make sense to have him be an Avenger so quickly if your issue was that he still needed to grow and mature as a hero. And now we did get a glimpse of what's known as the Iron Spidey suit. I thought it was interesting. At first I was like, ooh, because, shiny, but then the more I looked at it, the more it seemed a little bit garish and too much trying to draw attention to itself, or at least that's how it came off to me. I also wonder how it's going to be flexible based on the metallic materials that are in it, but hey, it's a suit made by Tony Stark, so it can be anything, I guess. But hey, I'm glad that Tony Stark let him keep the old suit. It really is the best depiction of Spider-Man that I think I've seen yet. Better than the one in The Amazing Spider-Man, which I also thought was pretty good. But anyways, we're wrapping things up in the high school. We see that, oh my gosh, Michelle is actually MJ, and so is she going to be Michelle Jane? Will she be Michelle Mary Jane? I'm not sure how they're going to do it, but hey, we've got a character that we've set up over the course of the movie with these random scenes. We'll get to see more in the next film. So what a satisfying film this was. And I also like the mid-credit sequence where you get to see that the Vulture isn't all bad because he refuses to tell Michael Mando the real identity of Spider-Man. But really, the after-credit sequence is something special. It's not huge, it's not going to blow your mind, but it'll make you laugh because it's got Captain America coming out, speaking in one of those public service announcements about the virtues of patience, and how you can sometimes wait for something a really long time and be underwhelmed and a little bit disappointed with what you get. Yeah, that's kind of what it was, and it was funny. And it speaks to what is going to happen more and more with end credit sequences now that they've become the norm. So I like that they took this self-referential, self-aware approach to finish off the movie. It was a humorous bit. It's in line with the tone and the humor of the rest of the movie, and I can't wait to see the next one. Okay, so that was Spider-Man Homecoming, and thanks for listening to all these thoughts if you're still listening. But if you agree or disagree with anything I've said, please type furiously into the comments section. I'd love to know what you think. Beyond that, if you like this video and you want to keep up with my content, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and it would be great if you were a part of that group. Also, you can hit the bell icon to be notified when a new video goes up. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.